Stop what you're doing right now, just for a second. I want you to find yourself, not your name, not your job, not where you grew up or what you believe or who you love. I want you to find the one who is doing the looking. Go ahead, look inward, find the thing you call you. Did you find it? Because here's what I suspect happened. You looked inward and you found asterisk thoughts. Maybe a quiet hum of awareness. Maybe a feeling in your chest. Maybe a voice narrating this very sentence back to yourself. But you didn't find a you. You found more experiences. And that tiny, unsettling gap between the looker and what the looker finds is one of the most explosive philosophical discoveries in human history. David Hume, an 18th century Scottish philosopher who had the rare courage to follow an argument wherever it led, looked inward with unflinching honesty and emerged with a conclusion so radical it rattled the foundations of Western thought. He said, "There is no self. There never was. What you call you is nothing more than a rapid, continuous stream of sensations, memories, emotions, and thoughts, all bundled together so tightly, so seamlessly, that the bundle itself creates the illusion of a bundler. There is no author. There is only the stream." Now, before you dismiss that as abstract philosophical wordplay, I want to tell you why this matters, profoundly, practically, today. Because if Hume is right, and I'm going to show you that he is, and that modern neuroscience is now asterisk confirming it, then nearly everything you use to defend, protect, and define yourself is a defense of a fiction. Every time you felt insulted, your self was injured. But what if there's no self to injure? Every time you've resisted change, that's just not who I am. You were protecting an identity. But what if the identity is a story you keep retelling, not a thing that actually exists? Every time you feared death as the destruction of you, what exactly were you afraid of losing? This is not a comfortable video, but it might be the most important one you watch. Because on the other side of this realization, if you can sit with it long enough, is something that isn't terrifying at all. It's freedom. Let's begin. Who was David Hume? Before we go deep into the idea, let's spend a moment with the man. Because Hume himself is one of the most remarkable figures in intellectual history, and understanding him makes the idea land harder. David Hume was born in Edinburgh in 1711, the younger son of a minor Scottish nobleman. He was, by all accounts, a cheerful, sociable, generous man, the kind of philosopher who loved good wine, good conversation, and good food, and was beloved by nearly everyone who knew him. Which makes it all the more striking that this warm, contented man wrote some of the most destabilizing philosophy ever produced. He published his magnum opus, a treatise of human nature, at the age of 28. He later described it as falling dead born from the press. Nobody cared. It was ignored for years. And yet that ignored book contained what Immanuel Kant, no minor figure, later said, awakened him from his dogmatic slumber. Kant, who had been happily working within a philosophical tradition that took the stable, rational self for granted, read Hume and had to start over. So what was in it? Hume was an empiricist. That means he believed the only legitimate source of knowledge is direct experience, what we can actually see, hear, feel, taste, and touch. You can't know something through pure reason alone. Every idea, he insisted, must trace back to a direct impression, a raw sensation. This was a scalpel, and he applied it to everything, including the self. The argument he made is so simple that it's almost embarrassing how long philosophy had avoided it. Here it is. The bundle theory, the argument itself. Hume opens with a challenge so direct it's almost aggressive. He says, if you believe in a self, a stable, continuous you that persists through time, show it to me. Point to it. Give me the direct experience of it. Because Hume's rule is, if it's real, there must be a corresponding impression. You can't just asterisk posit the self. You have to find asterisk it. And so he does what he asks of us. He looks inward. He writes, when I enter most intimately into what I call myself, I always stumble on some particular perception or other of heat or cold, light or shade, love or hatred, pain or pleasure. I never can catch myself at any time without a perception, and can never observe anything but the perception. Read that again. He goes looking for himself and he keeps finding things happening, asterisk warmth, a memory, a feeling, but he never finds the asterisk one who is experiencing asterisk the warmth, the memory, the feeling. He finds the river but no riverbed. He finds the music but no listener. He finds the thoughts but no thinker. Now, I know what the objection is because it's the objection everyone makes. But asterisk, I'm the one looking. Doesn't the act of looking prove I exist? This is almost exactly what Descartes said. Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. The act of thinking proves a thinker. Hume's response is devastating in its simplicity. Just because thinking is asterisk happening doesn't mean there's a stable I doing it. I think smuggles in the very thing it claims to prove. The word I in I think is an assumption, not a finding. Strip it away and what you have. Thinking is happening. Perception is occurring. Experience is arising. No author required. So what is the self for Hume? He calls it a bundle. A bundle of perceptions, a collection of experiences, memories, sensations, and emotions that occur in rapid succession, that are so fast and so interconnected that they create the asterisk impression of continuity. Think about a movie. A movie is nothing but a series of still images, photographs shown at 24 frames per second. There is no motion in a film. There are only frozen moments in such rapid succession that your visual system interpolates asterisk movement between them. The motion you see is manufactured by your perceptual system. It's a construction, a trick. Hume is saying the self is the same trick, applied to consciousness, individual moments of experience. This feeling, that memory, this sensation flash by so rapidly, so interconnected, that the mind constructs continuity where there is only succession. You are not a movie. You are a projector showing still images so fast that you look like a movie. Now let's make this concrete, because philosophy that can't land in daily life is just word games. Think about who you are at 3 a.m. when you can't sleep, anxious and replaying mistakes, versus who you are at 11 a.m. after a good breakfast and an encouraging conversation. Same person. In what sense exactly? The memories are shared. But the mood, the perspective, the threshold of patience, the fundamental asterisk feeling of being yourself, completely different. Now stretch further. Think about who you were at age 7, what you wanted, what scared you, what you believed was possible, the texture of your inner world. Is that the same you that's watching this video? You share some memories, a body heavily modified, and a name. But the sense of self, the actual asterisk experience of being you, has been entirely replaced, multiple times over, by a series of different selves who each felt at the time like the real and permanent one. Hume's point: there was never a stable you to begin with. There was always only the stream, and the stream keeps moving. This is either terrifying or the most liberating thing you've heard in years. To understand why it's liberating, we need to travel about 2,000 years earlier, to a place that had already solved this problem. The Buddhist connection, anattā, here is one of the most remarkable facts in intellectual history. Around 500 BCE, more than 2,200 years before Hume, Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, arrived at almost the exact same conclusion through a completely different method. The Buddhist doctrine is called anattā, a Pali word meaning no self. It is one of the 3 marks of existence, alongside anicca, impermanence, and dukkha, suffering. And the Buddha's teaching goes like this. What you call a self is actually a collection of 5 aggregate skandhas in Sanskrit. Form the body, sensation, raw feeling, perception, recognition, mental formations, thoughts, emotions, intentions, and consciousness, awareness itself. Look carefully at each of these, the Buddha says, and ask, is this the self? Is my body the self? It changes constantly. The body of an infant is not the body sitting here now. Is sensation the self? Sensations arise and pass. You are not your headache or thoughts the self. Watch them, they come uninvited. They leave without permission. You are not your thoughts. Is consciousness the self? Consciousness is just awareness, a mirror, not a face. The conclusion: there is no aggregate and no combination of aggregates that constitutes a fixed, independent self. The self is not a thing. It is an asterisk process asterisk. The Buddha used a beautiful analogy, the chariot. If I point at a chariot and ask, where is the chariot? Is it in the wheels, the axle, the frame, the horse? None of them alone is the chariot. Remove the wheels, no chariot. Remove the axle, no chariot. But assemble them in the right way and chariot appears. The chariot is a name for a relationship between parts. It is a convenient label, not an independent thing. You are the chariot. Now, why does this matter beyond intellectual curiosity? Because in Buddhist thought, the clinging to a fixed self is identified as the root cause of suffering. Dukkha, the unsatisfactoriness that pervades human experience, arises not from bad circumstances, but from trying to make permanent what is inherently impermanent. You try to lock in an identity. I am a successful person. I am someone who doesn't fail. I am not the kind of person who does asterisk that. And then life moves. Circumstances shift. The self you've been defending becomes impossible to maintain. And that gap between the rigid story you've been telling about yourself and the fluid reality of experience is where suffering lies. Both Hume and the Buddha are pointing at the same thing from different angles. Hume with the scalpel of empirical philosophy, the Buddha with the microscope of meditative inquiry. The conclusion: the self is a construction, and constructions can be deconstructed. But we now have a third source of confirmation, and this one comes from a laboratory. Neuroscience confirms it, Anil, Seth, and Thomas Metzinger for most of Western intellectual history. The self was philosophy's problem. Neuroscience had nothing to say about it because neuroscience didn't yet exist. That has changed. Two scientists in particular have done more than anyone to bridge Hume's philosophy, Buddhist practice, and modern brain science. Anil, Seth at the University of Sussex, and Thomas Metzinger at the University of Mainz. Their conclusions, reached through entirely rigorous empirical research, are startling in how closely they mirror Hume. Let's start with Anil Seth. Seth studies the neuroscience of consciousness, and his central argument, developed across peer-reviewed papers, a major TED Talk, and his landmark book Being You, is this: the brain is a prediction machine, not a perception machine. We assume that our experience of the world is a direct window onto reality. We open our eyes, light enters, and we see what's there. Seth says this is almost entirely wrong. What actually happens is this: your brain, sealed in complete darkness inside your skull, receives only fragmented, ambiguous signals from your sensory organs. It has no direct access to the outside world. So it does something remarkable. It generates an asterisk prediction about what's out there, and then uses incoming signals only to correct that prediction. You are not seeing the world. You are seeing your brain's best guess about the world, continuously updated. Seth calls conscious experience a controlled hallucination. The world you see, hear, and feel is a model, a construction produced by and for the survival needs of an organism. And the self is the same process, turned inward. Your sense of being a unified, continuous you, that felt sense of being a stable presence behind your eyes, is your brain's asterisk model of itself. It is another prediction, another hallucination. A controlled one and an enormously useful one, but a construction nonetheless. There is no you at the center of your experience any more than there is a physical movie inside a film projector. There is only the process generating the experience. Now Thomas Metzinger goes even further and deeper. Metzinger has spent decades on what he calls the phenomenal self model. His conclusion, detailed in his dense and important book Being No One Asterisk, is expressed with almost shocking directness. No such things as selves exist in the world. What exists, Metzinger argues, is a self-model asterisk, a neurological representation that the brain generates about itself and then presents to itself. The system models itself as a unified agent. It identifies with this model so completely that it can't see it as asterisk a model. The self-model becomes transparent. You look asterisk through asterisk it rather than asterisk at asterisk it. This is the deepest magic trick in nature. An information processing system generating a model of itself and then being unable to recognize it as a model. You are not the thinker of your thoughts. You are the thought the brain produces asterisk about the thinker. Metzinger uses the analogy of a mirror that can only show you its reflection, never itself. The self is the reflection, not the mirror. Here's what makes this land as something beyond abstract theory. Consider the experience of anesthesia. You go under. There is no experience of blackness, no sense of time passing, no dreams, and then you are back. What was in between? Nothing. No you was present, but the body continued. The heart beat. The cells divided. Biological processes ran perfectly well without a self at the helm, which raises a question worth sitting with. What is the self actually asterisk for? Seth's answer: The self is a model generated by the brain to coordinate the organism's behavior. It's a useful fiction, a simplification that allows a complex biological system to act as if it has unified intentions, goals, and continuity. It's not an illusion in the sense of being useless. It's an illusion in the sense of being a simplification that doesn't capture underlying reality. Like a map. Maps are not the territory, but maps are extraordinarily useful. The error is mistaking the map for the territory. You are a map that thinks it's a territory. And now, finally, let's talk about what happens when you genuinely understand this. Not as an intellectual idea, but as a lived recognition. Because this is where the philosophy stops being a thought experiment and starts being a practice. The practical STAKES, ego defense, is defending an illusion. Let me describe something you've definitely experienced. Someone criticizes you. Not physically, verbally. They say something about your work, your character, your choices, and something tightens inside you, a kind of alarm, a pulling together of defenses. Maybe you snap back. Maybe you go quiet and replay the conversation for hours. Maybe you can't sleep. Maybe you write a long explanation to justify yourself to no one in particular. This is ego defense, and it is one of the most exhausting, life-consuming, creativity-strangling activities that human beings engage. Now ask, what exactly are you defending? Because if Hume, the Buddha, Seth, and Metzinger are right, you are defending a model, a bundle, a constructed narrative that the brain generates moment to moment about a self that has no fixed existence. You are defending a sandcastle, not because you don't matter, but because the you you're defending isn't the real you. It's the story you've mistaken for you. The philosopher Derek Parfit, who spent his career building on Hume's insight, described the moment he fully internalized the no-self conclusion as one of liberation. He wrote, "My life seemed like glass. The opacity of the ego dissolved, and what he found underneath was not emptiness but lightness. He no longer needed to protect himself so vigilantly because there was less self to protect." Consider how much of your daily energy goes into narrative maintenance, the constant work of keeping the story of you coherent and favorable. You avoid certain conversations because they might reveal something that doesn't fit the story. You double down on positions you've already taken because changing your mind feels like losing yourself. You make decisions based on who you are rather than what's actually true or useful. I'm not a morning person. I'm bad at math. I'm an introvert. I'm not creative. None of these are facts. They are plot points in a story that the brain is generating to maintain the illusion of a continuous, consistent self. And because the story feels like you, dismantling any part of it feels like dying. But here's what's actually happening when you experience that feeling of resistance. You are experiencing the ego's survival instinct. And the ego's survival instinct is not the same as your survival instinct. The ego wants to remain unchanged. Life requires change. The ego wants to be right. Growth requires being wrong. The ego wants a fixed, flattering narrative. Reality is fluid and indifferent. When you identify totally with the ego, when you mistake the map for the territory, you fight reality constantly, and reality wins constantly, and you call that suffering. When you recognize the ego for what it is, a useful, impermanent construction, you can hold it more lightly. Use it where it's useful. Let it flex where it needs to. This is not detachment. This is not becoming a robot without preferences. This is the difference between wearing a costume and being stuck in one. Ego death, what it actually means. The phrase ego death gets thrown around recklessly, usually in the context of psychedelic experiences, spiritual retreats, or dramatic online posts. Let me tell you what it actually means, philosophically and psychologically. Ego death is not the destruction of the self. It is the direct, experiential recognition that the self was never what you thought it was. It's the moment the map realizes it is not the territory. And it doesn't always arrive through psychedelics or meditation retreats. Sometimes it arrives through loss, grief, serious illness, the end of a marriage, a career collapse, a creative failure so complete that the story you told about yourself simply cannot continue. These experiences are devastating when they are resisted, when the ego fights to maintain the narrative against all evidence. They are transformative when something in you can step back and recognize. The self I've been defending is breaking, and that might not be a catastrophe. That might be an opening. William James, the American philosopher and psychologist, studied conversion experiences sudden, dramatic shifts in a person's fundamental orientation to life. He found that nearly all of them followed the same structure, a complete breakdown of the old self-narrative, a period of chaos and disorientation, and then the emergence of a new organization of experience. The death of an old bundle, the assembly of a new one. Hume's insight makes this process comprehensible. If the self is a bundle, bundles can be rebundled. If the self is a story, stories can be rewritten. You are not a fixed thing waiting to be discovered. You are a process that can be redirected. The psychologist Lisa Feldman Barrett, whose work on constructed emotion dovetails beautifully with Hume, puts it this way: the brain is always constructing your experience. You cannot stop the construction, but you can change the materials it works with through experience, attention, learning, relationship, and practice. You are not finding yourself. You are building yourself, continuously, without end. The question is, are you building deliberately or by default? Identity rigidity as a psychological prison. Let's talk about the people who suffer most from the illusion of a fixed self. They are not the most traumatized people. They are not the most disadvantaged. They are the most certain of who they are, certain of what they're capable of, certain of what they deserve and what they can't do and who they are at their core. This certainty is experienced as strength. It is, in fact, a cage. Clinical psychology has a term for the extreme version: rigid thinking, a symptom of multiple psychological disorders, including depression, narcissistic personality disorder, and obsessive-compulsive disorder. The common thread: an inability to update the self-model in response to new information. But you don't have to have a diagnosable condition to suffer from identity rigidity. It shows up whenever you hear yourself say, "I'm just not the kind of person who." It shows up in the way you return reliably to the same emotional responses, the same anger at the same triggers, the same self-sabotage at the same point in projects, the same patterns in relationships. You tell yourself this is your personality, your nature, just who you are. Hume would say, that's a very convincing story. What if it's just a story you've told so many times that it feels like fact? The Buddhist teacher Pema Chodron describes ego rigidity as the fortress of the self, walls built to keep life's uncertainty out. And they do keep uncertainty out. They also keep growth, surprise, love, and transformation out. Because life's genuinely good things require a self that can be surprised, that can be wrong, that can encounter something it has never predicted and say, I did not expect this. I am changed. A rigid self cannot be changed because it is always trying to change experience to match its story, rather than changing its story to match experience. The practical liberation of Hume's insight is this: you are allowed to change. Not just allowed, you are changing, whether you recognize it or not. The only question is whether the change is conscious and chosen or unconscious and reactive. The bundle is always shifting. You can either watch it happen to you or participate in what it becomes. The objection, but surely something persists. 3 minutes. I want to be honest with you about the objection that won't go away, because intellectual honesty is more interesting than false comfort. Even if you accept everything we've covered, Hume's argument, Buddhist anattā, neuroscience's constructed self, something feels persistent. There is something it is like to be you * continuously across time. Memory creates a through line. Relationships persist. You carry consequences of past actions. You are held responsible for things your past self did. Does none of that count? Hume himself struggled with this. He was honest enough to admit, in an appendix to the treatise, that he couldn't satisfactorily explain how the bundle coheres, why these particular perceptions feel like *1 bundle rather than several. Derek Parfit addressed this most carefully. His conclusion: yes, there is continuity, psychological continuity, the overlapping chain of memories, intentions, and relationships. But this continuity doesn't require an * persisting entity any more than a river requires a fixed volume of water to remain the same river. The Thames is the Thames not because it contains the same water, but because of continuity of structure, geography, and relationship. You are the you of 10 years ago not because you share a soul substance, but because of overlapping memory and narrative. The continuity is real. The entity behind the continuity is the construction. And here's why that distinction matters. It means you can take responsibility for your past without being imprisoned by it. I did that is true. I am fundamentally the kind of person who does that forever. That's the story you have the power to change. The closing, what do you do with this? We've covered a lot of ground. Hume's empirical argument that the self is a bundle of perceptions, not a fixed entity. The Buddhist doctrine of anattā, the no-self teaching that identified the clinging to fixed selfhood as the root of suffering more than 2,500 years ago. Anil Seth's Neuroscience showing that selfhood is a controlled hallucination, a model generated by the brain for survival. Thomas Metzinger's devastating conclusion that there are no selves in the world, only self-models that have become transparent to themselves. The practical implications: ego defense as the defense of a fiction, identity rigidity as a psychological prison, ego death as liberation rather than destruction. And the honest objection: yes, something persists, but what persists is process and narrative, not a fixed entity. So now, what do? I'm not going to give you a 5-step system because that would betray everything we've discussed. Systems are for fixed problems. You are not a fixed thing, but I will offer 3 invitations. First, watch the narrator. You have a voice in your head that provides constant commentary on your life. It says that was embarrassing and they don't like me and I'm better than this and I always do this. That voice presents itself as you. It is not you. It is one of the streams in the bundle. You are not the narrator. You are the space in which the narration occurs. Begin to notice the narrator as *, a voice *, not the voice. It is information, not authority. Second, approach your identity with curiosity rather than defense. When someone challenges who you are, when circumstances refuse to match your self-story, instead of defending, ask, what is this showing me? A self that can be curious about itself is a self that can grow. A self that can only defend itself is a self that is already dying. Third, practice being a process, not a position. The deepest human suffering usually involves people who are stuck in a story about what happened to them, what they are capable of, who they are. The story has become the prison. You are not stuck. You are a river that has convinced itself it's a rock. Rocks can't move. Rivers can't stop. You are a river. David Hume sat in his study in 18th century Edinburgh, looked inward with everything he had and found nothing. No self. Just experience arising and passing, brilliant and brief. He didn't despair. He went to dinner with friends. Because here is the final, deepest irony of the no-self insight. Once you stop defending the self so furiously, once you stop trying to keep the story intact at all costs, you become more present *, not less. You become more available to the actual texture of experience, more capable of connection, surprise, grief, delight. The constructed self, defended obsessively, is like a fist clenched around water. The tighter you squeeze, the less water you hold. Open the hand. The water doesn't disappear, it just flows. That is what the you reading this sentence actually is. Not a thing, a flow.